What's going on there is essentially the content and the advertising is now merged. So if you see a blog or somebody blogging about a product, you see an ad about a company, it very well may be that is the advertisement, and they be merged right in. All right. Oops.
Brad, follow up on the blogging. That used to be a really big thing, probably 8 to 10 years ago. Is it still a pretty big trend? Like if you want to say you're the specialist in this topic, to actually have a blog that shows that you know what you're talking about? I remember that used to be a big thing. I don't know if it is still anymore.
So I'll tell you how people are using blogs a lot now is around search engine optimization, having fresh content. It also plays into Twitter. So what more and more people are doing is they are referencing blogs. So instead of putting some 140 character piece of wisdom, they may say,
Here's the link.
Here's the link. So that's how blogs have sort of been relevant again, is they're sourcing their information less so from news sources or search engine optimization, but they become things that people post.
Source to, yeah. Okay.
Source to. So the next thing I have here is about how to be a better public speaker. And so I'll tell you real simple, if you are going to be leading a company, you're going to be standing in front of people and talking. And so I'm a big fan of Toastmasters. So if anybody's not familiar with Toastmasters, Toastmasters is an international organization all about public speaking. And what they do is write in the name of the organization. It's a not-for-profit, and it's how you be the master of raising a glass and giving a toast. So that's sort of the origin. So anybody who's going to get married or be a best man or a bridesmaid may have to give a speech in a room full of people. They're going to teach you how to be ready for that. And what Toastmasters has is they have their 10 fundamental speeches, 10 fundamental speeches that you can walk through, and you actually get a certificate when you're done. I encourage anybody who's going to be standing in front of employees or customers to do Toastmasters and do their 10 talks. And I'll just tell you what they are. The first one's called the Icebreaker, and I'll dive a little bit into this one. This was the toughest one. The Icebreaker is you can talk about any subject you want. What they will do is, as you're speaking, they want to get out the you knows. And there'll be somebody sitting there with a buzzer, and every time you go, they'll buzz you, And that's just to get you used to talking in front of a group without using filler words. And that's a first step. The next one, I'll just read through these. Organize your speech, getting to the point, how to say it, your body speaks, vocal variety, researching the topic, using visual aids, persuading with power, and inspire your audience. So those are 10 talks that you will give as you go through the Toastmaster system. So Judy, I don't know where the nearest Toastmasters organization is, but we could probably find one, or maybe this group even wants to self-organize. I think it's very useful. It's also really interesting. You get to learn a lot about your community. So maybe that's something we'll consider, is having this group self-organize into a Toastmasters group and have everybody go through the 10 talks. I think it will help you tremendously. It helps me. It'll give you confidence, and it'll give you a structure for how to do public speaking. So it's called Toastmasters. And the last one I have here, a tactic that people encounter, is commercial leases. So at some point, you're probably going to have a place for your business that's not your home office. And the first thing I will tell you is there's no such thing as a standard commercial lease. So if you go and get an apartment, a lot of apartment leases look very similar. They're very standardized, in part because the government has a lot of rules on landlords as to what landlords can and cannot do for residential space. Commercial space, all bets are off. So there's not the oversight. So commercial leases, man, I've seen every different kind of thing in a commercial lease. So if you're about to sign a commercial lease, I would read it extremely carefully. There's probably a good chance it's poorly written. It's amazing how many people, how many landlords have just written their leases themselves. So don't assume that it's boilerplate language. This is one of those documents you want to read with a fine-tooth comb and look through everything. It's also worth noting, this may be a place to get yourself a lawyer for a one-off. So real estate lawyers are special. They're a slightly different breed. They're used to these type of things. I think it'd be worth your effort, particularly your type signing a long-term 5-year lease. Get a real estate lawyer to look at it, and spend a little bit of money to have them review it, and they will be able to identify the pitfalls that even a more experienced business person wouldn't. So it's worth the time and energy to do that. And there is a theme in real estate leases which if it wasn't explicitly stated as being done, it won't be done. So if they say they're going to paint the walls, put it in the lease. If they say they're going to make leasehold improvements, put the details of the leasehold improvements on the lease. Maybe they're an addendum, but it may say the landlord will make all leasehold improvements per addendum. And I see these addendums being pages and pages long. So it's not uncommon that you have all these details, because if it's not explicitly written in there, it won't happen. And the last thing I was to say about commercial leases is everything's negotiable. So these commercial landowners and real estate owners, they can be surprisingly flexible with the terms. And I've seen all kinds of things. So I encourage you to be creative. I know one. I'm thinking about one of the leases I was working with a fitness company. Is that the landlord had the right to come in and show the space when this particular one, they were doing spin classes, so indoor cycling, able to show the space to other prospective tenants when spin classes were going on. And for that, they got some consideration for other parts of the lease. So everything's negotiable, and understanding what the needs of that landlord are can be attractive. So those are my tactics that I want to throw in. I'm happy to field some on the fly if there's any other topics, or if there's any questions on all of it. So this semester we'll go back through what I covered. Let's see. I should have put my conclusion slide at the end. All right. Oh yeah. All right, so I talked about incorporating, picking a bank, QuickBooks, interviewing your lawyers, board meetings, logos, websites, public relations, online advertising, Toastmasters, and signing a lease. Those are my topics. Okay.
So first off, and you sort of addressed it, I think, but big law firm versus multiple smaller firms for different areas of specialization. So do you try to do would your suggestion be an all-in-one firm with various specialties, or are you better to split?
So I make it very much about the person. So I'm typically not hiring the firm, I'm hiring the lawyer. With the online resources, many of them now have access to a library of things they can pull off. So there's a service called LexisNexis, and
Sure.
there's other things. So I typically pick the person over the firm. One area where I've seen to really do some searching around is when you have intellectual property. So one thing's amazing, if you look at the resumes of patent lawyers, I just looked at one the other day. So this guy has an undergrad in material science, a PhD in material science, both from Ivy League schools. Then he went to Georgetown for law school, and he had some crazy specialization in a particular technological realm. I don't know what he got paid, but it was the kind of thing where you would really seek him out because he had this super tight specialization. You know, my first company, I was working with a lawyer in Minneapolis who I never met. I paid this guy for 7 years, never met him once. Heck, I don't even think I ever saw his picture. But he was a super specialist in an area of the law, and he had one of these PhD, JD kind of resumes, and he was a super specialist. So intellectual property is somebody specific to seek out. I would say the other realm, I do not have first-hand experience on this, but I have worked with entrepreneurs who have, is if you're dealing with Hollywood and entertainment law is its own beast. And so finding you're doing that kind of stuff, because there's all these rules on how you get paid depending on how your material is reused. So you get paid one fee if it's let's just say you have music, whether it's played on the radio versus sold on a disc versus licensed for a TV commercial versus it's incredibly complicated. So that would be where you want to find an industry expert in that realm.
And the one other one that I would add to that, if you have any interaction with the FCC, telecom law is its own specialization. It really requires their own.
And it's really wacky. Telecom law is nutty. I mean, it's what not only are you going over the airwaves, but what technology are you using over the airwaves. Yeah.
Taking into account any words of wisdom.
So two things with picking an accountant. One is identify the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant. And so bookkeeper, there's a lot of bookkeepers out there. Bookkeepers are a way to keep your documents straight. So they're gonna have all your stuff filed very neatly. They like to print things. They hate trees. They're gonna have everything in paper. But a good bookkeeper is a way to keep your stuff straight. And find somebody who is just hyper organized. And they're a typical bookkeeper, depending on the size of your company, they're gonna come in at least once a month, maybe once a week. One of the tactics I've done with bookkeepers is I would have a box on my desk, which was for the bookkeeper. And the papers that came in and needed to be filed or entered or whatever, I just threw them in the box. She would come in, grab the box, and just get to work. Okay, so that's a bookkeeper. They're going to come on a regular basis. As for an accountant, where I've seen picking an accountant matters is what your tax consideration is. Right? So it also depends on your comfort with accounting. So if you've never taken accounting, you may want to go on a recommendation of somebody who you've worked with, but it's not uncommon to have your company accountant separate from your tax accountant, particularly if you're in a realm that has a lot of tax considerations. Because taxes typically, you can combine them, but it's not unheard of to have a separate tax account. So if you're going to have a lot of tax breaks and considerations and pay forwards and all these kind of things. But I think that's one, I find tax accountants are more useful to identify through your network. Sir.
Logos and taglines, patent attorney or roll your own through the patent office? How do you navigate that so as not to get a knock on the door, 6 months or 6 years later?
Diving a little bit into it, you can protect your logo instantly by just putting the mark TM next to it.
Right.
So you do not have to formally file or register with the government. So by having a public display of your logo and putting the mark TM on it, you are thereby protected. So there's not a situation where somebody can come back to you later and go, oh, I ran to the patent office, I filed your logo, I get to snake it. And to give you an idea of how powerful that TM mark is, I think Google just had TM next to their name on their website for like the first 7 years of their company. And they determined that TM mark. You can go and spend the money and time to get the R in a circle, which is a registered trademark. But these days I'm seeing less and less people doing that. So you can protect yourself immediately with TM. The other thing you can do is, as you put out published works, is identify them as copyright. So one of the things I do with my lecture slides, for those of you in the front row, when you come to these events, you'll see on the bottom it says, copyright 2016 Brad Treat. And by identifying it as copyright, it's copyright. So declaring the copyright is sufficient.
Okay.
So yeah, there's not a whole lot you have to submit beyond that. Yes, ma'am.
With the EIN number, do you have a different number per business if you're the same owner of the different businesses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's really a tax tracking number. And if you have multiple businesses that have different EIN numbers, you should also have separate bank accounts. And so one of the things where I see people get into trouble is they may have an EIN number for their company, but they're somehow commingling the finances either with another business or more often than not with themselves. So have these things be separate. You have your personal bank account, you've got your bank account for the company. If you have another company, it's got a different bank account, it's got a different checkbook. And one of the good tricks is get a for your finances that you're going to run through for the company, have separate credit cards. Even if you're personally guaranteeing the credit card, or just keep those statements separate. So I mentioned the bookkeeper. So I had 2 American Express accounts, one for myself, one for the business. And so every time that account came in, I printed out, because my bookkeeper hates trees, put that piece of paper in the box, and that way all that information got in there. The other nice thing about using these digital tools to do a lot of your purchasing is, if you spend the effort to set it up, QuickBooks will import that directly from they'll do many of the banks. They'll pull it right from your bank statements. They'll pull it right from your credit cards, and that's another advantage of using the QuickBooks. And you don't have a transposition error. And what QuickBooks will do is it'll import those expenses, and then it'll ask you to go through and categorize them to what they're supposed to be to. And QuickBooks is smart enough to start remembering and say, hey, the last time you bought from Home Depot, it was for construction. Do you want it to be construction again? You can put yes, 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 yes. It's really smart. It allows you to categorize very quickly because the system learns. It starts to analyze your spending patterns and categorizes things for you. So it'll bring it in from your different accounts. Glad you mentioned that. Cool. Any other questions about anything? Tactics? All right. Well, normally at this point, we'd ask you what you want to talk about next month. But we're actually going to ask you what we want to talk about for August. Because for July, at the request of one of our previous ones, we're going to have Tony Frontera. He's one of my colleagues in the Southern Tier Startup Alliance. He's an entrepreneur in residence. He's a faculty member at Binghamton University, and his specialty is branding. And so he's going to come in and talk about, I'm trying to remember the exact name of his talk. Do you remember?
I don't know the exact name, but it's branding.
It's
Yeah.
branding. Branding 101.
Oh, it's branding versus marketing or advertising or something like that. No, it was a combination. Difference between
You remember what it was, Lee?
It's branding, guys.
It's branding. So he's a branding expert, 30-year veteran of branded companies. He's going to come in and talk about his experience, a new speaker for most of you.
Yeah.
But he's an expert. We talk about marketing, branding, and really from a ground level perspective, what you need to know. So that's we do these, for those of you who have not been here, we do these on the second Wednesday of each month. They're always free. You're always invited to come. We're going to keep doing them until people stop coming. One of the requests that I have is if you have not yet done so, we do have a sign-in sheet. Even if you've been coming to these things, it helps us keep track and report back that these things are going on. I do ask you to sign up. So before I turn it over to open mic, what would you guys like to talk about in August? What would be some subjects that you want to hit on? Anyway, we throw them out.
Cash flow?
Cash flow, so details of accounting and cash flow. Okay. So getting into the nuts and bolts of, I could do 30 minutes on cash flow. All right. Cash flow, we got to vote for cash flow. What are some other topics on there I don't know about?
One of the ones we had talked about was building your entrepreneurial community, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, so building entrepreneurial communities, there's been a significant amount of research on this. I have a book on the topic where they studied the difference between Singapore and Jamaica. So Singapore and Jamaica both gained their independence from the British Empire at about the same time. When they did, their populations, land mass, and natural resources were almost equivalent. Today, Singapore's financial situation is almost 100 times better than Jamaica. So the question is what happened there, and a lot of it was how the government encouraged entrepreneurial communities. So entrepreneurial communities can have a massive magnifying effect. What's that? You think about the native problem?
I think there's other things involved with that also.
Well, they have drugs in Singapore. So, and they cover that in the book. So, entrepreneurial communities. There's a guy named Brad Feld, F-E-L-D. He's a successful entrepreneur investor who is going around the country evangelizing entrepreneurial communities and how to build them and support them and grow them. So I think so we got cash flow, we got entrepreneurial community. I think that's a good place to start. We'll let me noodle those and we'll. Any show of hands who wants to do cash flow? Okay, and then entrepreneurial communities. It's like a tie. All right, so maybe we've got August.
Could you
and September.
define entrepreneurial communities? You and I know what that means. I forget. Not everybody.
So an entrepreneurial community would be the informal network of. So the first thing is people who think entrepreneurially. So they're looking for how to use new business creation as a way to unlock value in an economy. And these communities are often very supportive of one another. So even though they may be in different industries, the way they're approaching their work life, they're self-starters, they're creative in accessing the resources. And what's been shown is that it's an area that the government can support, not with necessarily their dollars, but just in how they put the rules together. So making it easier for companies to start new businesses or get new leases or hire or fire employees, things like that. Gotcha. All right, cash flow.
Can I test an idea with one of those?
Yeah.
So one of the things we were thinking about for building entrepreneurial communities was also to have booths from local associations or businesses who help promote other businesses. So like local banks or the Scoped office or the SBA or some other folks like that. And so actually using the back room and having some booths set up for people who are trying to start businesses, actually getting them connected to the people they need to talk to at one of these events. So sort of like a mini expo. Would anybody but me think that was a cool idea?